So electricity is a super powerful thing. In fact, it is the superpower that both Thor and the Flash share, and it's pretty versatile. While Thor is able to channel large quantities of electricity from thunder and lightning into his hammer and use that high voltage to shock his enemies, the Flash is actually able to generate electric charge on his own. But what if I told you that there was a superhero that could do both?
This ugly animal is our superhero, the electric eel. Well, it's not really an eel. It's a type of strongly electric knife fish that lives in South America. Specifically, in order to achieve favorable conductivity, these fish swim in fresh water. Get it? These babies can produce an electric shock of up to 600 volts. Normally not enough to kill a human, but enough to seriously mess up another animal. Not only can they produce high voltage shocks, they generate their own electric field. This production of electricity is super important for animals that live in murky waters. Instead of their eyesight, they must rely on electric signals to navigate their surroundings.
So now the question is, how do they generate their personal electric field?
Ions between the inside and outside of our cells are unevenly distributed. In neurons, potassium ions are maintained at high concentrations inside the cell, while sodium ions build up on the outside of the cell.
But here's something weird. While the outside of the cell is positively charged, the inside of the cell is negatively charged. This is because of anions, negatively charged particles that are too big to leave the cell through the membrane, so they build up on the inside of the cell.
The creation of this charge gradient is super important for neurons to generate electrical signals for intercellular communication. Neurons take advantage of this charge difference by opening and closing their ion channels. What are ion channels? Well, because these sodium and potassium ions are charged, they can't just move through the membrane. Those hydrophobic phospholipid tails won't have that. Instead, they travel passively through proteins called ion channels. When a signal, or impulse, is sent out from a cell body, the neuron sodium channels open, allowing positive sodium ions to rush into the cell passively along their concentration gradient. Once the cell reaches a certain threshold of sodium ions, an action potential will fire, sending the electrical signal acetylcholine down the axon of the neuron.
Wait. You didn't even answer the question. How does this relate to electric eels?
Bruh, chill out. I'm about to get to that.
Electrosensing organisms have disc-shaped cells known as electrocytes. These cells are connected to nerve fibers. Like most cells, these electrocytes have a negative resting potential, meaning the inside of the cell is negatively charged. When an eel's spinal motor neurons send action potentials down their nerve fibers, the electrocyte opens up the ion channels in its membrane. This allows positive sodium ions to flow into one side of the electrocyte, causing its potential to reverse. Actually, this makes the cell polarized, negative charges on the left and positive on the right, like a battery. There's a big voltage difference now across the cells, and electric eels make good use of it. Electrocytes are stacked up in series inside the eel, like batteries stacked up inside of a flashlight, allowing all those voltages to add up. This is how the eel charges up.
It can send out high voltage shocks. On top of that, because electrons flow through the cell to equalize the charge, a constant electric field is created around it, so it can sense its immediate environment, such as prey, and communicate.
This electric field allows electric eels to engage in electroreception. Electroreception is essential to the growth and the survival of the electric eel. This is a complicated process that first begins in the electroreceptors. Electroreceptors are sensory cells that play a major part in relaying information. The electric eel constantly emits an electrical field while exploring its environment. This allows it to use active electroreception. This is where the electroreceptors detect distortions in the electric field. This triggers a series of action potentials leading to the chemical signal glutamate being sent to the brain. Receptors bind to this signal and figure out what the eel needs to do.
How does the eel decide on its next steps? The response depends on what type of signal the electroreceptor receives. Prey and competition are in for a major shock. Electric eels can decide between using a high voltage discharge or brief pulses. The electric eel decides its battle plan by what it detects. High voltage shocks are for when prey is nearby, while brief pulses can cause faraway prey to twitch, revealing their location. The electric eel then sandwiches prey between their head and tail, resulting in a high voltage shock discharge that messes with the muscles and immobilizes prey. It's a new and improved knuckle sandwich.
Electroreception also helps communication between nearby fish via electrical signals. In this way, electric eels make threats, mate, and recognize their surroundings. It's like an underwater Instagram account. You can cyberbully and get reported, like pics and slide into DMs, and find your friends. We're extremely similar to the electric eel in this sense. We use our phones to communicate, while the electric eel has a system built in. They win though, at least they don't have to pay for data.
There are some things that can really mess with an eel's power, though. First, let's talk about water. It's essential to life, and the universal solvent, largely because of its polarity, which allows for the solvation of many ions. It's a great conductor of electricity, which works out for the eel. At the same time, this can lead to electrically crowded environments, where another conductor can screw up the eel's ability to detect distinct disruptions in its environment. Picture this. You're trying your best to communicate with someone across the hall, but there's a billion other people talking, so they can't even hear you. In the same way, electroreception is disrupted. Too many other charges in the environment, and the eel gets confused.
Even just in general, electroreception is dependent on the conductivity, which determines the image the electroreceptors relay, which means any disruptions in the conductivity are no bueno for fish. For one, conductivity is dependent on ions to carry electrical charge. Changes in temperature can change the ability for these charges to be carried through the water, as molecules may move slower or faster. Plus, because of the many ions present in salt water, it's a much better conductor than fresh water. These high salinity levels can lead to water becoming too conductive though, producing a stronger electric current throughout the electric eel, which is highly dangerous, meaning the eel could seriously shock itself.
Pretty cool, right? Somebody go call Marvel. We've got another movie-worthy superhero on our hands.